Good. So in the yesterday's class, what we have discussed, I think it is pretty much clear. Okay, so we have discussed import substitution, financial inclusion. The words are clear. Okay, so import substitution. Why did they come up with import substitution? This is something which you have understood yesterday, and we understood that they wanted to protect the domestic market. So that is the reason they have come up with import substitution. Okay, and see, I've shown you this diagram also yesterday, where we were trying to restrict imports here. Okay, so we can restrict imports through trade barriers. That is what we have understood yesterday. And there are different types of trade barriers. One is tariff barrier, another one is non-tariff barrier. So these are the things which we have understood yesterday. So tariff barriers are barriers in the form of tax, and non-tariff barriers are non-tax barriers. Okay, so one question to you all: out of tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, which barriers are going to be more dangerous for trade? Out of tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, which barriers are going to be more dangerous, which will restrict trade? Yes. Okay, so the answer is non-tariff barriers. Simple. Here, tariff barrier is in the form of tax. So the product will become costly when it is going to move into the country. Okay, but when we talk about non-tariff barriers, okay, so it is something like we have discussed something like a quantitative restriction. Okay, and I said quantitative restriction, there will be an upper limit which is levied, beyond which products will not be allowed into the country. That is called as quantitative restriction. Similarly, we have something like the sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Sanitary and the phytosanitary measures. Okay, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, in the sense that they will stop allowing certain products into the country, saying that it will affect the plant and animal health in the country. So for example, they'll say we'll not buy Alfonso mangoes from India because you have used chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, etc. Similarly, they can come up with saying we'll not buy shrimp from India because your shrimp is not in line with WHO, World Health Organization standards. So they can restrict the products completely, saying that it will affect plant and animal health. So this is a very typical thing, in the sense like non-tariff barriers are used by many countries so that they will protect their domestic market. So non-tariff barriers can increase protectionism. Non-tariff barriers can increase protectionism. So one more word here. So protectionism is you are trying to protect your domestic market. Protectionism is you're trying to protect your domestic market. So protectionism as a scenario, if you see presently also, during the Trump administration, Trump was trying to protect US market. Trump was trying to protect US job market. So protectionism especially has increased after 2007-8. So in 2007-8, there was financial crisis. Don't worry about that for now. But in 2007-8, there was financial crisis. Okay, so during that point of time, after that crisis, these developed countries started protecting themselves. Okay, so protectionism. Till here, I think things are clear. Okay, so let's start moving, let's go to the next entity. Okay, we have discussed this trade deficit and trade surplus. And trade deficit, if we have to understand trade deficit, so we said imports are more than exports. Simple. Yesterday we have discussed this. I said trade deficit means imports will be more than exports, and trade surplus means exports will be more than imports. Simple way to understand it. Yesterday we tried to discuss this. So we discussed trade is something like deals with export and import. Okay, and when I'm referring to deficit, means imports are more than exports. This is what we have understood yesterday. And trade surplus is nothing but we find exports more than imports. Exports more than imports. Okay. Okay. Exports more than imports. Okay. Now, India's case, we generally face the problem of trade deficits. In India's case, I'm using the word problem here. So India's case, we find that most of the time, our imports are more than exports. Our imports are more than exports. Now, what will be the problem? What is the issue? We'll try to understand. So yesterday we were talking about something called as a liquid currency. I use the word called liquid currency. So what is this liquid currency? Liquid currency is that currency which is accepted by every country. Liquid currency is that currency which is accepted by every country. So that is, it is, suppose Indian rupee is there. Indian rupee is not accepted everywhere. Okay, so Indian rupee is not a liquid currency. Okay, Indian rupee is not a liquid currency. Okay, similarly here, so mainly there are four major currencies which are seen as accepted by everybody. So these are the liquid currencies. One is, we have the dollars, US dollar. Another one is euros. We have pounds, and we have Japanese yen. So dollars, euros, pounds, and Japanese yen. So these are the four liquid currencies which are accepted by every country. Now, since our country's currency is not a liquid currency, to do trade with other countries, definitely we need to maintain some reserve of liquid currencies. I'm repeating the statement. Since our currency is not a liquid currency, if we have to do trade with other countries, we need to maintain a reserve of these liquid currencies, and such reserve which we maintain is also called as Forex reserve. Such reserve which we maintain is also called as Forex reserve. So this Forex reserve, US need not maintain Forex reserve because US currency is an accepted currency. US dollar itself is an accepted entity. Okay, so since Indian rupee is not accepted, if you want to do trade, you have to maintain reserve, which we are calling it as Forex reserve. Okay, so this Forex reserve in India is maintained by this institution called RBI. Forex reserve in India is maintained by this institution called RBI, or we call it as the Reserve Bank of India. So Reserve Bank of India is going to maintain something called as Forex reserve. So these are simple basics. Okay, so Reserve Bank of India maintains something called as the Forex reserve. It holds the Forex reserve. And we see in newspapers that India's Forex reserve has touched $460 billion plus. $460 billion plus. Earlier, we had problems in 1990s. I didn't touch 1990s, still we are only in 1969 now. So in 1990, India faced something called as an economic crisis. And the main reason for facing that economic crisis was we did not have this Forex reserve. This Forex reserve completely depleted. We had only Forex reserve that is sufficient for doing trade for 15 days. And that is the reason we faced a crisis, a financial crisis in 1991. But similar crisis, financial crisis, India may not face today. Though our economy is going down because of COVID, GDP went negative. So we are not going to face a similar kind of financial crisis now because we have sufficient Forex reserve. Okay, so this is something which we have to understand. And this Forex reserve is under the control of this institution called RBI. I hope till here things are clear. So I'll try to link up from here. It's little conceptual. So easy only, just try to concentrate. Okay, so when I'm referring to Forex reserve, today in basics class, we'll touch few only. So Forex reserve constitutes certain components. It has certain components. There are four major components. One is you have these foreign currency assets. Like we have something like the four major currencies, the four major liquid currencies which we are talking about, that is dollars, euros, pounds, and Japanese yen, which you maintain, which RBI is going to maintain. Okay, then we also have gold. See, remember, gold is seen as hard currency. Gold is seen as hard currency. So when I'm referring to hard currency, it means it is accepted by everybody. It is as liquid as the foreign currencies. So that is the reason whenever there is a financial crisis, there is some problem, we go and pledge gold. We go and pledge gold in other countries and we take loan in the form of dollars. So this is what we do. So gold is also part of Forex reserve. Tomorrow something wrong happens to dollars. There is a threat that the dollar value is going down. Value and all I'll discuss now just in 2 minutes. So if dollar is not stable, if pounds are not stable, so our RBI or Indian government basically, or RBI may depend more on gold. It may procure more gold and it can stock this gold because gold can be exchanged anytime and acceptability of gold is high. It is a kind of a liquid currency and therefore it is called as a hard currency. So gold is also part of our Forex reserve. I hope it is clear till here. So one is the four major currencies. Two, we have the gold. Now, second question to you all here, one important question. Why is it that there is so much of demand for gold in India? The next question here is, why is it that there is so much of demand for gold in India? Now, I want your answers right in the chat. Okay, so why we have so much of demand for gold in India? Craze, jewelry, production, tradition. So here one is, remember, I'm using the word tradition. Okay, you have seen some marriages, especially the South Indian marriages, Keralite marriages, the girl will be drooping with gold. Okay, so gold is part of our tradition. Okay, we hold gold as part of our tradition. The richest gods in India found them in the form of gold. Okay, so tradition is something very important aspect. Another important reason for so much of demand for gold, nobody has mentioned, for future is okay. Another important aspect is movement of black money. Black money. See here, whenever a bureaucrat or whenever a politician, whenever a businessman is caught for, especially government officers being caught with respect to corruption, what do you find in their house? You find gold biscuits, okay, gold ornaments and land documents. So they try to maintain their black money in the form of gold, silver, and these kind of land documents, binami documents. Now, what is that? Why? So when Modi ji has announced demonetization, okay, demonetization, 500 and 1000 rupee notes were pushed off. When demonetization was announced, on that day, gold shops were running till morning 5:30, and they were ready to accept these 500 and 1000 rupees notes and give them bills, post-dated bills. That means it is something like they're giving bills in something like as if you have purchased the gold 6 months back and 5 months back. So one understanding here is, more is the black money movement, more would be the demand for black assets like gold, silver, etc. So that is also one more important reason for demand for gold in countries like India. Okay, third reason, okay, I'm using a word here called inflation. Now, word here is inflation. Now, what is this inflation? So inflation is increase in prices. I'm using the word here, inflation. Inflation means increase in prices. Always remember, whenever there is inflation or whenever there is high inflation, remember, value of money is going to reduce. Whenever there is going to be inflation, value of money is going to reduce. That means, suppose a particular pen, suppose this pen is costing 500 rupees today, and after 6 months, the same pen is costing 1000 rupees. Increase in price, inflation. That means whatever I can buy for 1000 rupees after 6 months is same as what I can buy for 500 today. Simple logic here. So my 1000 rupees after 6 months is equal to 500 rupees today. It means because of inflation, value of money has reduced. Value of money has reduced. So if you are holding cash, especially during inflation, it is going to be a wrong strategy. Whenever the prices are increasing in the market, there is no point in holding raw cash because the value of cash is going to reduce. Because the value of cash is going to decrease. Okay, so that is the reason. What you have to understand is, whenever you are making investments, also some people push their money into bank accounts, right? You put your money into savings bank account. Okay, now when you're putting money into savings bank account, you are offered an interest rate of 3.5 to 4% maximum. You're getting an interest of 4%. But suppose outside inflation is increasing at 6%. Inflation rate increase in prices is 6%. So you're putting 100 rupees in bank. Okay, outside inflation rate is 6%, but you are getting interest of only 4%. It means you are making a loss, in fact. Okay, so because if you take this inflation into consideration, you are not getting anything. In fact, you are getting minus 2%. So prices are increasing at a faster pace, but the interest rate which you are getting, this is a scenario in the banking system presently. So that is the reason we have to look into other areas of investment which will give you returns at least more than the inflation rate. If the price rate, same with respect to salaries, if your salary hikes are at a rate of 3%, 2%, but the inflation rate in the economy is 8%, that means there's no point in getting such hikes also. It means in reality, you did not get a hike in your salary. Okay, so therefore, whenever high inflation is there, people tend to, it is better that you buy gold. It is better that you hold gold rather than holding cash. Because though price of gold increases, the demand for gold is not going to reduce suddenly. Gold has its own demand. So that means whenever inflation is high in the economy, that is the prices are increasing in the economy, okay, companies tend to buy more gold because gold's impact on with respect to inflation is less. So I'm going to use a word here. Okay, hedging. Hedging. Okay. Lakshmikant has written yesterday's news about inflation. Okay, so somebody has answered 6.2%. Okay, fine. First of all, I made it very clear yesterday also. First of all, get the basics right if you are freshers. If you are repeaters, then the style of the class will be different. This is for a freshers class. This is a basics class. Okay, so this 6% inflation or the 6.2% inflation or how is inflation measured? Is it CPI index? Is it WPI index? Is not our discussion today. Okay, our discussion is only to understand the words in the process of evolution of the Indian economy. Remember this, we are only sticking to that area. Okay, where we are going to understand some keywords in the form of story and try to interlink it to the current aspects later. This is what we are doing now. Okay, so please keep that in mind because some students are new. I don't know how many of your freshers and how many of your repeaters, but if you're pushing those numbers, if somebody gets confused, so that is the reason I wanted to mention. Okay, fine. So here I'm using a word here called hedging. Okay, so hedging, the word hedging means avoiding risk. The word hedging here means avoiding risk. So what is this avoiding risk? Avoiding risk means whenever inflation is there is a risk associated with respect to whenever there is inflation in the economy, there is a risk that the value of money can go down. Okay, so therefore, to hedge this risk related to inflation, hedging related to inflation. That means you want to avoid risk. Hedging means what? Avoiding risk. Whenever you want to avoid risk with respect to inflation, okay, we generally tend to buy gold. So gold is purchased to hedge risk with respect to inflation. That means you're trying to avoid risk with respect to inflation. Inflation is increasing, value of money is going down. It's a risk associated with inflation. You want to hedge this risk. That is what I wanted to make it clear. One more point here. Hedging means avoiding risk. You want to avoid that risk. So by buying gold also, you can avoid that risk to some extent. So another word which I wanted to push here is hedging. Okay, so one is tradition, another is circulation of black money. Okay, third is hedging risk associated with inflation. Hedging risk associated with inflation. Fourth is gold is a liquid currency, hard currency. So gold is hard currency. That means it's liquid. Its liquidity is high. Tomorrow, if I hold gold, whenever in crisis, I can put it in Muthoor Finance and take loan. So that liquidity aspect is always there with respect to gold. So its liquidity is high, and therefore also there is demand for gold. So these are the reasons why there is demand for gold. Just, is it clear? Now, I said our foreign Forex reserve constitutes, one is the 4 major currencies, 2, we have gold, okay, and we have discussed something like what are the reasons for so much of demand for gold in India, okay, and 3, we also have something called as SDRs. Okay, the third component of Forex reserve is SDR. Okay, special drawing rights, SDR. Now, these are some currencies, or these are currency representations issued by a bank called IMF. Don't worry much about it in the basics class. In the IMF class, we can discuss it in detail. So special drawing rights are a kind of paper currencies. It's kind of an entity. It's a representation of currency issued by an entity called IMF. IMF is a bank. IMF is a bank, International Monetary Fund. So after the Second World War, what happened was the developed economies were not doing well. Okay, somebody is saying, can I repeat? I lost network connection. Okay, so I'll come to that. Okay, so after the Second World War, the developed economies were not doing well. They were routed because of war. So to revive these economies which were routed because of war, there was a conference that was called as the Bretton Woods Conference. Okay, so there was a conference that was held called as the Bretton Woods Conference, which was held in US. And based on this Bretton Woods Conference, they decided to push some institutions, like one is World Bank. They wanted to come up with this institution called World Bank. So to help all those countries to restructure all those countries which were affected, they suggested one more institution called IMF. IMF is what? International Monetary Fund. Okay, it's a bank. IMF function is mainly to pull out countries from financial crisis. So those countries which are facing economic crisis, those countries which are facing financial crisis, so these countries will be, IMF is going to pull these countries out of this crisis. Okay, and the third entity which they decided that time was ITO, International Trade Organization, trade. But this organization did not come into existence. Don't worry much about this. ITO did not come into existence. It deals with trade. Okay, so that means after the Second World War, to revive those economies which were routed because of war, a conference called a Bretton Woods Conference was held. And this Bretton Woods Conference has come up with suggesting certain institutions to be set up to revive the global economy. And two institutions, which famous institutions which came out because of Bretton Woods Conference, one is the World Bank. Okay, so International Bank for, you have in this World Bank, you have different entities. You have World Bank Group and World Bank. As of now, you just try to understand that So World Bank's primary function is to reconstruct those economies which are affected, reconstruct those countries which were affected during the Second World War. IMF, International Monetary Fund, mainly deals with pulling out countries from economic crisis. So these two, that is, one is World Bank, another one is IMF. These two institutions are also called as the Bretton Woods twins, because they are formed because of this conference called Bretton Woods. So they are also called as the Bretton Woods twins. Okay. So in 1970s, IMF institution has issued these entities called SDRs, which are liquid entities. Okay. So who issues SDRs? Special drawing rights. They are issued. Voice is not clear. Is the voice clear? Clear. Okay, so voice is clear means it's your network problem. Okay, fine. Okay. Okay. So I was okay. During economic crisis, IMF is going to help countries. IMF is going to help countries to pull these countries from economic crisis. Okay, and these two entities called World Bank and IMF are called as Bretton Woods twins. Bretton Woods twins. Okay, so now during 1970s, there was too much of demand for dollars. Okay, and this story is not in the basics class, but you wanted to have one more alternative to these currencies like dollars, euros, and pounds. And therefore, IMF has come up with this entity called SDRs. SDRs are issued by IMF. So this SDR paper, this value of SDR will be decided based on the values of 5 major currencies. The value of SDR will be decided by the value of 5 major currencies. Obviously, dollar, euros, pounds, Japanese yen, and along with these 4, we have the Chinese currency, that is Chinese renminbi. So we also have Chinese currency, that is Chinese renminbi. Okay, so that means here we have 5 major currencies which are going to decide the valuation of SDR. So SDR is also part of our Forex reserve. Okay, so in the basics class, we are only going to decide on discuss only 3 components of Forex. We're only going to discuss only 3 components of Forex. Okay, so but there are 4 components of our Forex reserve. Okay, so one is we have the 4 major currencies as we have discussed. We have gold as we have discussed. Okay, and then we have SDRs. Okay, so SDRs. And then we have the reserve tranche position. Reserve tranche position, we call it as the RTP. Reserve tranche position is RTP. Reserve tranche position. Okay, so RTP. So 4 major components of Forex reserve. Okay, so one is we have the 4 major currencies, followed by gold, followed by SDRs. These are the 3 entities. And then we have the RTP, that is the reserve tranche position. Okay, so these are the 4 components of Forex reserve. 4 components of Forex reserve.